Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Friday morning, man. Storms roaring through Parkin area. We're about 30 minutes out of Memphis at the Cherry Farm, great hunting lodge in Lee Hall. Got a lot of folks to talk with us today. Going to start off with Richmond Weaver over in Greenville, South Carolina, the upstate, talking Clemson and the ACC. He's also working on that documentary 2.5 years into it, SoCon, Super Conference, 100 years. I'm really looking forward to the red carpet when they launch that one. That's going to be great. And speaking of documentaries, our good friend Norman Jetmanson down in Birmingham, along with his friend David Cruz over in Oxford, spent 6 years working on their documentary, Sewanee 1899 Unrivaled. And that is now up for documentary awards. It's been posted up for several. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that they bring home the big W for that. Second segment, Jason Caldwell checks in inside the Auburn Tigers 24/7. He has always got a lot to say, and looking forward to hearing about what's happening at Auburn, moving fast in the portal. I don't like the portal, but right now it's the law of the land. You better deal with it. You got guys leaving. You better bring in guys better than they were. It's like when you sell a stock, you better have a better one in mind if you're going to sell one, or don't sell it, or just you can't stay in cash too long. So anyway, hour number 2, we will be joined by Tyler McComas out of Oak City, Norman, Oklahoma Boomer Sooner coverage. Looking forward to having Tyler McComas on, one of our new members of the SEC. We've got great coverage with Texas, with Bo Carter, Anwar Richardson, and Ken Capps. And now we're going to bring in Oklahoma coverage with Tyler McComas. Been looking for somebody that really gets it and has their finger on the pulse of what's happening out there in Norman. And Tyler McComas is going to be that man. Boomer Sooner. Look, 51 conference championships over the years, 7 Heisman Trophy winners, 7 national championships. So they bring in a lot of tradition. And I don't think that there will be much of a learning curve when the Sooners get into the league. And that's going to be a lot of fun to hear what he has to say. So in the 4th segment today, we will be joined by Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, covering the back-to-back national champion Georgia Bulldogs. So speaking of national champions, Clemson won 2 of those things in the last 7 years. And they played another time. And the expectations now for the State rise. Clemson and Jordan were looking close. Their question is, can we maintain that trajectory? I would think we must have a model that's not going to change. Still recruiting. We've got a hell of a staff. I think I think they're not going to be. I expect them to win a couple losing games. Florida State, of course, is going to be up there. If we get the video next back to do. But let's talk about that ACC race.
Yeah, well, Rob, I think I'm having trouble hearing you. I can barely hear you right now.
And you can barely hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
now I got you.
Is this better? Okay.
Yeah, much better. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. We just got through with a massive thunderstorm, came through here. It's wrapping up now. So if you hear the angels bowling, as they said in the movie Kingpin when it was thundering, that's what that is in the background. But let's talk about the ACC race, Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah, and so this is a year where you start seeing expectations not only on the Clemson side, but now with Florida State, because we're seeing that maybe a little bit of momentum, and you've got Jordan Travis, obviously one of the rising quarterbacks, what he was able to do last year, and now his name's being thrown around for Heisman. could be in the mix. And so Mike Norvell, now it's going to be interesting to see how Florida State responds with these type of expectations, having the target on their back. And a lot of people are looking at, okay, this Florida State team, can they dethrone Clemson in terms of being able to secure an ACC championship? And obviously we know Clemson was not able to win an ACC championship a couple of years ago, as Pittsburgh and Kenny Pickett are able to get that ACC championship. But you look at, is it too early right now for Florida State? And this is what's going to be interesting, because knowing that they've got LSU to start the season with, and that's obviously a big game, but how much does that really mean in terms of the season? Because I think you look at, from a perspective now with the ACC going divisionless, which creates an opportunity with Florida State and Clemson. Could they, either team, lose but still be able to have a rematch in the ACC championship game? And that is paramount, I think, for both Clemson and Florida State, that just because you lose that game doesn't mean you're out of the picture. Because I believe there's a scenario where for Florida State, they can lose either one of those two games, LSU or Clemson, and then still make the playoffs, because they'll still have an opportunity, obviously winning the other games, to win an ACC championship. And especially the mindset and the odds would play out that it would be Clemson and Florida State in the ACC championship, with a rematch depending on how that game goes there in Death Valley. And as a guy covering Clemson for a long time and has seen the struggles from the 90s into those early 2000s, Clemson versus Florida State.
Yeah.
And now Clemson is on the other side of that. Now this is a scenario, can Florida State finally get over the hump? And Rob, as you know, I mean, it's a law of averages. It's hard to keep beating a team year in and year out. And knowing that there's been a couple of years that Clemson's been able to squeak by Florida State, is this year that Florida State finally breaks through and is able to beat Clemson? Now it's going to be tough because it's going to be in Clemson, as I just mentioned, but there's a lot of expectations for Florida State right now. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, trying to live up to these expectations, potentially being ranked in the top 10 preseason.
Yeah, because this is year 4 for Mike Norvell. And because I watched him at Memphis up close, got better and better every year. But I was talking to one of my really smart football friends for a long time yesterday afternoon. And what Mike Norvell is great at doing is going to other coaching staffs, elite coaching staffs, and getting them to come take a look at what he's doing. He's very good at evaluating and finding the guys that other people might be missing out on. But Florida State, good God, we know they can recruit. They're in the state of Florida. They're right at ground zero for that. With Clemson, I'm looking at them, the quarterback issue. Cade Klubnik now is going to be the guy. If that's clicking, last year too, not having Brent Venables and Tony Elliott, there was a lot of, it was a change. You can't just plug and play. It's not that easy, is it?
No, it's not. And I think that's what we're seeing, that, and how many times have we preached, it's hard to win and it's even harder to keep winning. And especially when you have turnover in some of the key positions, obviously a coordinator type level of positions. And that's why I've always said, or I shouldn't say always, over the past 4 or 5 years, I don't know if we give Nick Saban enough credit in terms of how great of a coach he is. Because think back to his scenarios, it seems like every year it's a revolving door as far as coaching staff and at the coordinator level. And he continues to put a product out there that is vying for national championships. And so as much as we can talk about the culture at Clemson and Dabo Swinney and all of that, and obviously there's some similarities between Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban, but there's also some significant differences. And, you have to look at it, but knowing that there's something there at Alabama, because they continue to keep winning even when they have all these transitions. And I think for Clemson fan base, it was eye-opening to see the difference that when you do lose some of those key pieces within your organization, it can be tough to replace those and live up to those type of expectations. And so now having Garrett Riley come in, I think this showcased that Dabo Swinney, he's a business guy too. He understands, and as much as it's building the culture and its family and all of that, he knows the expectations. It's to win, and if his organization is not living up to those expectations, he has to take a hard look and evaluate where they can improve. And obviously, one of those where he felt was at offensive coordinator position, and knowing that that's going to be a big part of it. But also, I believe, Rob, that it's not just the offensive coordinator position. That's why I don't expect Clemson just to all of a sudden be vying for a national championship because they bring in Garrett Riley. Yeah. We know how important, obviously, the coaching staff is, but at the end of the day, it's the players that make plays. Now, can you have a coordinator and head coach? Can you put your guys in the best position? And I think it was Vince Lombardi that famously would not send film, or wasn't, one of those guys that valued sending film. He would send the playbook to the opposing coaches and say, here's our plays. Now you just got to figure out how to stop it, but also more importantly, when I'm going to run those plays. And that's the other side of, having, your offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. It's the chess match that goes on with these coaching staffs, but it's those players that are out there. And Cade Klubnik is obviously a talented quarterback. Is he ready to be able to put the Tigers on his back, because he doesn't have the same type of supporting cast that Deshaun Watson had, that Trevor Lawrence had, and that's just the reality of it. So when you have those type of personnel along with generational quarterbacks, and Clemson was able to have a lot of success. But I think what we've seen over the past couple of years is that Clemson defensively, yes, they've still been one of the top teams defensively, but it's offensively, it's where they struggled. And I think it's just based on a lot of key positions. They haven't had the same type of personnel at wide receiver, at running back. And as great as Will Shipley is, he's not Travis Etienne. And that's just the reality of it.
Well, I mean, look at Alabama. After that run of quarterbacks with Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Bryce Young, number one pick in the draft. And now Nick Saban goes out in the portal and gets a guy, Tyler Buckner, that had lost the job to Sam Hartman, who transferred in from Wake Forest. I mean, Sam Hartman was going to be the starting quarterback. I don't think they guaranteed him that, but I don't see anybody beating that guy out. He's incredible. Okay, so now Alabama, you've got Jalen Milroe. I don't think he's the answer. Ty Simpson, he needs more time. So they're in a situation very similar to Clemson. And Clemson, talent-wise, facilities-wise, they have everything. The fan base, they have everything. But, man, you're seeing you're right. No Travis Etienne. Shipley's good. Offensive line, that's another issue. How good is that offensive line, and how deep is that running back room? Because, you look at these receivers you've had like DeAndre Hopkins, and you just go back to Justin Ross. By the way, what is his status health-wise? I know he started out in that national championship game like, oh, my God, this guy is extraterrestrial. And he got that neck or spine injury or what have you. So where is he now?
So he had a genital defect in his spine. So that had to be addressed. And so that was addressed. And that obviously kept him out an entire season. And then there was the questions, would he ever play football again? And he was able to come back. But then it was just, I think, just from a mental standpoint, was he really engaged? And then he had a foot injury, didn't help his progression. And now, he was signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, was on the practice squad, and finally getting healthy. Now, if there's a guy that, based just on his talent level, this guy can play in the NFL. But we know how hard it is to be able to break through. And it'll be interesting to see. But he's still trying, to be able to break through with the Kansas City Chiefs and get, promoted up to the 53-man roster. And so this is going to be a big offseason, heading into this season right now. But all reports that he's making a lot of progress, getting healthy. And I think that's the biggest thing because, as you talked about, he exploded his freshman year onto the scene. And people hadn't seen that type of freshman play before. I mean, it was Sammy Watkins that exploded on the scene for Clemson, and then a Justin Ross. But that's my point. Going back to, Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence had guys that they could throw a 50-50 ball, but it was actually more of like an 80-20 ball because these guys would catch it 80% of the time. And from DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Martavis Bryant, then also. You had Jordan Leggett at tight end. You had Mike Williams there, and then T. Higgins and Justin Ross. These are guys that are now you're seeing them on Sunday making big plays, and that's just the difference. The wide receiving core right now is lacking at Clemson. So as much as Cade Klubnik can be a talented quarterback, I'm just not certain he has the same type of weapons that we've seen Clemson have in the past.
Yeah, and we're going to take a break and come back for just a couple of minutes because I know you're on a tight schedule this morning. But you talk about Mike Williams. When everybody started suddenly talking about the back shoulder catches, that's the guy that I still, when you said his name,
King, yes,
he was the king of the back shoulder. I nightmares about watching that guy. But Justin Ross, T. Higgins, the list is long, and you just want guys like that. And maybe there's one or two on the roster. You don't know, but Clemson recruits at a high rate of success. We'll be right back for a few more minutes with, Richmond Weaver. Okay, here we go. Richmond Weaver on Clemson after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Sorry about that, Richmond. I'm sitting there talking to you, and I'm going, I had a bunch of stuff coming in all at once. Thank God that clap of thunder didn't knock us off. But anyway, when you talked about Clemson's talent level, they go back a couple of years ago. The big guy out of California, that wasn't Kayvon Thibodeau, was it? He went to Oregon. He was committed. There was a guy that was committed to Clemson that was the number one player in the country. And then he wanted to take other visits, and Clemson said, see you later. How many years ago was that? 4 years ago?
Yes, I think that was 4 years ago. And that's that's Dabo Swinney. And when he says, if you're going to commit, it's a commitment. And at that point, you should stop taking official visits. Obviously, players have 5 official visits that they can go on. And from Clemson's standpoint is that the investment that they're putting into that particular player, they're wanting the same on their side, that, okay, we're committed to you, so you be committed to us if you're deciding to commit. Because I think that's the big thing. It's not that Clemson's, in a position of trying to say, oh, you can't go on official visits if you're coming to Clemson. It's if you're deciding to commit. And a lot of times these players, they get on campus, they start feeling the love, and it's like, oh, I'm ready to commit. And it's like, well, okay, hold on a second. Let's calm down a little bit, and let's make sure that you're truly in a position that you do want to commit, because this is what commitment means to Clemson. And I don't think Clemson is the only school that does that. It's just been more publicly made that Dabo Swinney talks about it, that, he doesn't want players that are committed to continuing to go out there and looking at other schools. And I know you, Rob, you and I have talked about this from time to time. It'd be the same thing if, you're in a committed relationship and your significant other says, yeah, I'm committed, but you know what, let me go. I've got 5 more dates I want to go on. That's
exactly.
Not feasible. So I don't think it's an issue, but it is interesting how the spin doctors will try to say something negative about Dabo Swinney and Clemson by saying, oh, look, they're blocking them from going and continuing their official visits. That's not the case. It's you're making the decision to be committed, so we want you to be committed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when Clemson probably has a lot of kids that just big dogs walk late. Coach Dye used to say that about a lot of the recruits, the big guys. And so if you're recruiting an out-of-state kid across the country, you don't want him to commit publicly anyway, because once he does it, that pressure is coming from everywhere. So another way of looking at it on the recruiting is say, you can take those other visits. I'm coming to Clemson though, Coach. All right, well then don't go public with your commitment. At least don't do that. Maybe there's some of that going on, because it's a tough deal, because we all know, I know Auburn flipped Keldrick Falk out of Highland Home from Florida State. They're late. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say it doesn't happen, but you do like a kid once he commits publicly, and says, I'm not going anywhere else. But then if he starts taking visits, then I'm like, the hell with him. And if they don't sign in the December signing period, they're not coming.
They're probably not coming. That's right. Yes.
Look, I got to keep you on schedule, as I promised. We value so much you taking time to join us. It means a lot, and love it. And bottom line, you put out great work. Update us on the documentary and tell people how they can follow you and listen to your great show. Let's do it again next week.
Yes, sir. More than happy to. As always, it's a pleasure being on with you guys. And, here in Greenville, South Carolina, people can listen to me on the Richmond Weaver Show on 104.9 Fox Sports Upstate. But you can also listen whenever and wherever. All you got to do is just download the iHeartRadio app, and you can be able to listen to the show, and it is podcasted also. And you can always follow me at Richmond Weaver. And as far as the documentary, I've got multiple things going on right now, trying to line up last few interviews for this Southern Conference 100-year history documentary, and with Adrian Peterson. And no, not that Adrian Peterson that you might be thinking of, but Adrian Peterson at Georgia Southern. And just the success that Georgia Southern had in the Southern Conference. And Adrian Peterson, he was a hell of a running back that I don't think people give him enough credit. So looking at an opportunity being in Statesboro with him coming up. But we're anticipating in the fall, we'll have this 100-year history of the Southern Conference out.
Okay, so there will be some mention of Erskine Irk Russell, one of my favorite
teams. Of course. You better believe it.
He played at Auburn with Vince Dooley and for Suge Jordan, an amazing coach. And Tim Stowers. Tim Stowers won a national championship at Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
By the way, a little bit of trivia, and I'll let you go. The last two-way player in Auburn history, Tim Stowers.
Wow. There you go.
Montgomery.
I love learning something new each day. So thank you, Rob.
You bet. Hey, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and go Clemson Tigers live from the SO Club.
I didn't even realize I'm wearing the Clemson today. Here we go.
Hey, I love it. Right. I love it. Hey, I'm telling you, when I was a kid, my choice is always I was going to go to Auburn or Georgia or Clemson. I was going to keep going up Interstate 85 till they let me in. But I would write Clemson, and Danny Ford would send an autographed picture every year and a Clemson media guy. They were unbelievable, and I followed them, listening to them and watching them. I still remember Homer Jordan out of Athens, Georgia, winning the national championship in 1981. You being from Smyrna. Now, by the way, you're a Braves fan, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes.
All right. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Rob.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye. That is Richmond Weaver over in the upstate Greenville, South Carolina. Absolutely love having him on the show anytime we can get him, because he's an outstanding journalist, but he also a documentary feature filmmaker. This one on the Southern Conference is going to be a lot of fun to watch because 100 years, the history of the Southern Conference. You know, when it started back in the 1923 or so, they had 23 members, and eventually it became the SEC in 1933 and the ACC in 1954, long before Jason Caldwell and I were born. But Jason, great job. I was watching yesterday that website, Inside the Auburn Tigers. Technically it's autigers.com. I'm watching it on there. Great interview you did with Ryan Williams. And I mean, I don't know how many people are doing what you're doing, but you are to be applauded. You are going out on the road everywhere to see these kids. You would be a fantastic financial advisor, because if people asked you, should we buy this stock? Even if they wanted to give you a lot of money, you would say, no, it's not suitable for you. I couldn't get you to come off during the Harsin era because you said, this is what I see. So you are definitely the truth broker. You see things that a lot of people don't see. Go back a year ago at this time when those great recruiting class was coming up. 22 4 stars, 7 5 stars. How good is this class compared to that? And how much better off is Auburn than they were a year ago?
Yeah. No, it's completely different when you start talking about, kind of where the program is compared to last year. It's all about talent. It's all about getting the roster built up with much talent as possible. And, it helps when you're, in the right system, you're doing the right things on offense, especially. That'll play a big part in as well. Yeah. But no, it's just, it's just having a staff, especially at the top with a guy like Hugh Freeze, that understands how important recruiting is. And so they're going out and he's talking to guys. He's keeping in contact. They're continuing to push. I mean, that's what recruiting's all about. And so we'll see what this summer looks like. I believe June's going to be a really busy month. They're having guys on campus, official visits, all those things. I think it's going to be a pretty busy month for this staff as they kind of head into year number one.
Yeah. Well, and you did a great job as always. I think what makes it so good having you on is you lay everything out numerically. Okay. Auburn said 19 guys leave via the portal, but Hugh Freeze and the staff have got the Tigers back up to 78 scholarship players. So you can get 7 more. I look here at the recent addition of Peyton Thorne at quarterback. And that's a strong addition. What do you see in him that makes you think he can be the starter? And what concerns do you have about him? And, why did he leave Michigan State to begin with?
Yeah, I think there's maybe some issues with Michigan State in general. It wasn't just Peyton Thorne that left. We saw some other guys left that were really valuable parts of it. So I think that's part of it. I think some of it is he wanted the chance to go and do something different and new. And I think there's a little bit of Bo Nix in this one too. I think he had heard a lot from his own fan base and said, you know what, I'm gonna go somewhere else and prove that I can do this with the right fit and the right system. I think there was some of that as well. So I think it's a combination of a few things. This guy's been really successful when they were able to run the football. There hadn't been many quarterbacks that aren't successful when you just put it all on their shoulders. There's been a few. Most of the time it takes having some help to make guys really good. And we've seen that at Auburn over the years. We've seen it at other places. Rarely do you see guys other than in a system that's just designed to throw it all over the yard. Most of the time, if you're designed to be play action, your running game is going to be heavily involved. If you can't run the football, you're not going to throw it very well. And that's what he ran into at Michigan State last year. They were dreadful in running the ball. He had 7 yards against Ohio State. I think 25 against Penn State. I think they had 5 games with less than 50 yards rushing. You're not going to be very good if that's what you're building your offense around. And so I think for Auburn and for Peyton Thorne, Robbie Ashley, whoever it is, the key's still going to be able to run the football. You're not going to be good enough to just to throw it 45 times and be successful. You got to have a run game, and I think that's what he's looking for.
You look at this running back room at Auburn. I mean, you think about it. You're bringing in Jeremiah Cobb out of Catholic and Montgomery, and you've got Damari Austin, Jarquez Hunter, Bate. And I'm thinking about, when was the last time Auburn had this much depth in the running back room?
It's been a while. I think you look, especially you're getting ready to add Jeremiah Cobb as well. So you're getting ready to have a pretty full complement of running backs. And Auburn has been in pretty good shape with the running back room. But I think you look at it, and there's a lot of different types of guys in this group. You still don't have the true maybe sledgehammer running back. Sean Jackson could be that guy, but I don't know that he'd be a guy that'd be in the mix with the other guys right now. But you look at it, and you got some different types of guys. You add in Jeremiah Cobb, who I think's an all-around back, can do a lot of things coming in from Montgomery. And so, I think it's a good group. And, you look at it and you start going, okay, what's it work and how does it work? Well, you still got to have the offensive line group, and that's been the most important thing still for this team. And they added another piece of that puzzle this past week to give them more depth on that offensive line. That's the key to making everything work, and that's why it hasn't worked, consistently over the last 5 or 6 years. It's still going to be, you got to stay healthy. There's still not a ton of depth there, but you're in a lot better shape than you were. There's no question you're in better shape than you were, when Hugh Freeze took over the job. It's not even close.
Yeah. If you go back a year ago, you had talked about the 23 season would be just potentially horrible for Auburn. Can you imagine if Brian Harsin were still there at Auburn right now, and he had not changed his views on recruiting or whatever? Auburn had 6 offensive linemen, and now they've got 15. Again, you've done a great job. You've been doing this for years of laying out a lack of recruitment of offensive linemen at Auburn. And Hugh Freeze and this staff have come in. How good is Jake Thornton as a coach developing players? And is he that good of a recruiter? Because something's clicking.
I think he's a guy that has been successful from a coaching standpoint. That Ole Miss offensive line was pretty good last year, and it wasn't full of NFL players. They did a really good job of being able to run the football. So I think he's a guy that's a really good football coach, but he also understands what he's looking for. And right now, they didn't have any choice. That was the thing about this class. They had no choice. They had to go get transfers. I mean, you're not going to build a roster to compete in the Southeastern Conference with freshman and junior college guys right out of the gate. It's just not going to happen because you had to have these guys in year one. That meant they had to go get transfers. And so they understood the job that was in front of them, and they were able to do it. And so it actually took probably some of the pressure off in terms of, the high school recruiting part of it, because they knew that, look, we're not recruiting guys to play right now. Now you want them to compete, and if they do, that's great. But they had to have experience to be ready to go in year one. And so they went out and found a lot of those guys. They added another one in Jaden Muskrat the other day that can compete for a job. And you have some holdovers that have played some football for Auburn, mostly on the interior. But I think Jake Thornton is a guy that, has the background, young guy, but it still has gone out and proven it. And I would expect this offensive line to be a, I thought last year they were solid, especially when they got to doing what they should have been doing all along, which was running the football and doing some of those things. Once they did that, they did a pretty good job. But I think this will be a group that'll go out and be a good fit for what they want to do on offense.
Yeah, because you're right. When you had Kenneth Walker III there in 21, it was a lot easier to run the ball. And you lose. That's when they brought in 15 guys in the portal, and 14 of them were big time contributors at Michigan State. And I think Peyton Thorne looked at the handwriting on the wall. Looks like he made a very good decision. I want to switch to baseball. We're going to take a break. We'll come back for a few more minutes with you. But this Auburn team, and Butch Thompson was on the show Wednesday morning. This is becoming Auburn's identity. Maybe they struggle. Looks like there's no hope. The pitching staff has issues, and they find guys, because Auburn's top 3 pitchers probably hadn't pitched a full game yet, a full 9 innings combined. But you've got new guys coming up, Herbert Holtz and Chase Alsop. I want to get your thoughts about how does this staff do it. Of course, the game was rained out last night in Oxford, and Ole Miss will be giving everything they've got. So it's going to be tough, but let's talk some Auburn baseball right after this quick break. We got Jason Caldwell inside the Auburn Tigers Sidelines Friday Blitz after this. Jason, Auburn at Ole Miss going to be a Friday, and I guess it's a doubleheader tonight. One game Saturday.
Doubleheader today, starting at like 2:00 today. So
okay, all right. So Oxford, hopefully it's not going to be rained out again. There's a chance of storms around here all weekend, but you got to worry. You can't worry about it unless TBG says it's going to be raining. Then it will. Are you surprised? Or are you just getting used to this with Butch Thompson and Carl Nunemaker, Gabe Gross, and Darren Schoenrock? But that guy's got some experience as a pitching coach. It's just amazing to me. People, that's it. This team, there's nothing there. Here they are at 11-13. And Butch Thompson, before they went to South Carolina, and he said LSU, he goes, I look at this as an opportunity. I'm not worried about we're playing number 2 and number 1 back to back. The guy's a psychologist. He's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's he said something the last couple of weeks that is absolutely true. He said players are allowed to get better, and that's the truth. The guy doesn't have to be the same player he was to start the season, and he shouldn't be. He should be better by the time you get to this point in the season. And without Joseph Gonzalez, without Tommy Sheehan, those are 2 guys that I think I expected to be weekend starters. So you take those 2 really key pieces out, and all of a sudden it changed the dynamics of the entire pitching staff. Because you mentioned it, like they don't have a guy that's going to go out and get you 7 or 8 innings. They just don't have that guy. But they needed somebody to get them 4 or 5. And that's what they were able to find with Tommy Vale and Christian Herbert Holtz. And Chase also showed up last weekend. He's the most talented guy. He's the most talented guy they got on the pitching staff. It just hadn't clicked yet, and they've now kind of figured out some roles. And so you're right. It's not going to be easy. Ole Miss is a team that has its back to the wall because they're fighting for a chance to get the SEC tournament. That their only chance to make an NCAA tournament right now is to win the SEC tournament. So if they want to keep playing, they got to keep winning. And so that's going to be a desperate team. But, Auburn's a team that, as Butch Thompson said the last couple of weeks, just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to do anything more. Just do what you've done, which is pitch, throw strikes, play defense, and timely hitting. That's the key for this team. And this Ole Miss team can swing it. They can hit home runs. But Auburn just has to be who they are. And if they can continue that, then they'll have a chance to keep playing for quite a while, like they've done, the last few years.
Yeah. Jason, Chase also throws in the high 90s. You're right, talent-wise, it's pretty impressive. And you look at the strike zone, the pitch clock. Coach Thompson, he's not a big fan of that narrow strike zone. And it's not the same in every conference. why did the SEC go to it? And then he pointed out we have the best umpires. They get paid better than anybody, and they're reviewed and held to a higher standard than anybody. But it's, as he said, they're not in the majors yet.
No, it's had a big impact. It's taken a while for pitchers to figure it out too, because for probably the first half of this season, guys were used to getting a strike zone that was a little wider, that you got a little bit of leeway. As I've said a couple of times on this show, had Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine had the strike zone now that they have in baseball, they wouldn't have been as successful. And it's not a knock against them. Those guys are great pitchers, but they also got the benefit of being able to throw it where they wanted to. And that meant if you can throw it there consistently, we're going to give you that strike. Well, now with TrackMan and with such a fine, the umpires are graded and held to a higher standard. And that means they're more cognizant of not giving pitches a little bit off the corner. And so it's forced guys to have to be more precise, and location is more important than ever. And so because of that, these young guys especially, they're used to being able to throw the ball down the middle. Throw it down the middle in high school, and you're going to get 99% of the guys out. With if you're an SEC level pitcher, you're going to get most everybody out you face. Well, you can't do that in this league. Throw it down the middle, and it gets hit hard. And they've had to learn that. And it's not just Auburn; it's everywhere around this league. Even really good pitchers. There's only one Paul Skeens. That there's not another one of those guys in this league and in the country, in my opinion. He can throw it, but he also throws it where he wants to, and he has 3 different pitches. And so I think it's forced these guys to grow up. They've grown up. They just have to continue that growth, and that's the thing now is you got to just continue where you're going. And for a guy like Chase Alsop, that means you got to throw strikes. And you got to be able to change speeds. If you do those things, then he'll continue to develop and he'll be able to get guys out.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the pitching, and now there's one Paul Skeens, and he came from the Air Force Academy. How likely is that someone goes into the portal or transfers from a service academy? I was asking myself that the other day, and then I looked at Paul Skeens, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's where he came from. But hitting wise, Auburn lost so much from last year, but the bats are coming alive. But as Coach Thompson said, and you alluded to it a minute ago, I think Auburn, LSU walked 6 Auburn batters Sunday. And Auburn, of course, run ruled them 12-2. After Paul Skeens, their pitching staff at LSU, it isn't, epically deep, is it?
No, it's not. And that's the thing. Tennessee's probably the deepest pitching staff. They got the most talented staff. Then Wake Forest, probably the 2 most talented staffs in the country right now in terms of what they've done. But Tennessee went to Georgia last week and lost 2 out of 3. You got to put it all together, and they did. They haven't done that as much this season. Wake Forest has done it. We'll see it. How that translates out of the ACC. If you're having to do that in this league, it might be a little bit different. But we've seen, the consistency on the mound has been the key. Auburn's been more consistent the last 3 weeks. If they can keep that consistency on the mound, then you're going to give yourself an opportunity to win every time you step out there, and that's the goal.
Yeah. Jason, look, I know you're on a tight schedule this morning, so I want to keep you on that. Let people know how they can keep up with you and follow you, because there are not many people that put out the content that you do consistently. It's like, I know the position you're in because stuff's going on 7 days a week. And if it happens, you got to cover it. But thumbs up and hats off and double bonus for everything you do, because as we follow these teams, when you got a Jason Caldwell, it's a luxury.
Yeah, Rob, I appreciate it. Yeah, you can check us out at auburnundercover.com will get you there. autigers.com will get you there as a part of the 24/7 network. And you can also follow me, as you see there, on Twitter at ITATJason. All
right, Jason, real quick, how do you think Auburn will end up doing against Ole Miss? What does Auburn have to look for? Last question.
Yeah, I think if you can go out and again throw it, move into a doubleheader, change the dynamics of things, because it shortens your bullpen because you're a 2-day instead of 3-day. Auburn has probably a little bit more depth right now than Ole Miss does. They go out and swing the bats and do what they've done. I think they'll have a solid chance to go there and win a series, and that's the key right now. If you Auburn's 11-13 heading into Friday, you could win 4 out of 6 here, get to 15 wins, then you're solidified everything you want to do in terms of postseason play and are just playing for to try to make a run. So that's the key again. Don't go over try to do anything special.
Yeah, we got it. Oops. Jason Caldwell inside the Auburn Tigers. And I'm going to tell you what, you think about going on the road in the SEC, and it will give you nightmares. Ole Miss, I guess psychologically, they're the defending national champions. But you got to play a doubleheader. And, you think about it, they are the defending national champions. They got a lot of pride. They're going to be giving everything that they've got. So if you're Auburn, you just go in there and be who you are. And the goal, if you can get to 14 or 15 wins in the SEC, hell, you can go to Omaha. You'd like to get there and then go win as many games as you can in the tournament. That's insurance. Again, you can debate it as much as you want about the significance and the relevance of Hoover for the SEC baseball tournament. But I'll tell you what, it matters. It absolutely matters what you do in Hoover, because you don't want to set a losing tone. But, last year, Auburn went there and got knocked out early, had more time to get ready, and was able to host a regional. And they did that. UCLA, Florida State, that was big, big. So I look at this SEC baseball race as, the teams that don't fall apart, keep their composure. LSU, Arkansas, you got A&M, Auburn, Alabama, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I don't think the two, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, they're just, they'd have to win every game left and get to 12 and then do really well in the tournament, and that's where it could help them. You go over in the Eastern Division, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky strong. Tennessee they lost 2 out of 3 at Georgia last weekend. It's not that Georgia's not good. It's that just a couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of people saying Tennessee was the hottest team in the conference, which means they're automatically one of the hottest teams in the country because of the high standard that SEC baseball is held to. It is. I look at Missouri, but look at the SEC East: Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Tennessee. Missouri struggles, but that's the team you got to watch out for. Teams don't want to go into the offseason on a losing note. So if you've got to play Missouri coming up, you damn well better be ready, or they can ruin your season. That's how this game goes. Right? College baseball, you've got 3 years that you've got to stay. Now, it doesn't mean you can't transfer, but 3 years. A lot of these kids are there for 3 or 4 years. That's why you see development. But when the pitchers, honestly, I think so many of these pitchers are coming in because they're starting so young. They're coming in with arms that are worn out for a lot of them. And then they've got to go through a lot of rehab. They go through strength training, dietitian. Everything that they do in college is structured. So I think, honestly, you're a lot better off, unless you're a first-round pick and the money's just too big to say no to. You're a lot better off going to college for 3 or 4 years and getting that. You go to the minors, you're going to be on the buses, staying in the Motel 6, playing 162 games or whatever. That's a long, long season. That's a lot of wear and tear on an 18, 19-year-old. I think people don't give enough thought to it, that your body at 18 and 19 is not the same as it is when it's 23 and 24. There's a big difference. Talk about it a lot, but you play Brigham Young. Their offensive linemen, a lot of those guys are 23, 24 years old. If you're putting some young guys, freshmen, sophomores, 18, 19-year-olds on the line of scrimmage, going head-to-head with that all day long, it'll wear you out. Now, that doesn't mean Brigham Young is automatically going to be national champions every year. They're not. But they're pretty damn good. They always are. And one area they're always good at is offensive line. And offensive line requires development, maturing, a lot of time in the weight room. But you're not going to get better. You're not going to get better on the offensive line if you're not willing to be patient and be developed. Okay. Same thing with baseball. It is so hard to find the pitchers, all right, and depth in a pitching staff. And again, you talk about Paul Scanes at LSU. He's probably going to be the number 1 or 2 player taken in the Major League Baseball draft. But behind him, there's not a ton of depth. And every team at this time of the year is fighting injuries, fatigue, whatever. But, at the same time, you hear, well, it's a long, grinding season. Well, damn it, that's what you train for. Now's not the time to be complaining and saying that you're tired and you're worn out. Everybody knows it's a long season. Everybody else has to play it, okay? That's like when people say, we would have done a lot better, but it rained. Well, it rained on both teams. And if you got beat, it's because you weren't the better team. When you start making excuses about why you lose and how, well, if this hadn't happened, well, God bless. If everything went your way all the time, you never had to face any adversity, things would be great. But that's what happens. And I like what Butch Thompson said about this team. Hey, players are allowed to get better. Don't discount that. That's a very basic statement on the surface. But if you use your brain and you think about it, go a little bit deeper, just because the guy starts out the season struggling at the plate or struggling throwing from the pitcher's mound, that doesn't mean he can't get better. That is why we have coaches. Coaches are there to develop players. And the worst thing you can do as a coach is to take all of your second and third team players and put them over on the side and just focus on your starters. That's not good. I mean, you get guys injured, you're SOL. You've got to think about that. You got to think about so much, but if you overthink it, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. But right now, I'm looking at this SEC baseball race no differently than every year. You're probably going to have 9, maybe 10 teams from the SEC get NCAA bids. And a lot of them are going to be hosting regionals. Obviously, they want to hope they can host the super regional. But this is the time of year when you just got to find excuses to win. Everybody's in the same boat. So there are no excuses, and you can't let the moment be bigger than what it is. I mean, college baseball in the Southeastern Conference, it is the standard for the rest of the country. And you know what? Butch Thompson made a good point. Auburn's been to the College World Series in Omaha twice since, and LSU hadn't been in a few years. Now, you know what? They are the standard of college baseball. They're going back. We'll be right back with more after this quick commercial break.
Hey y'all, it's Ainsley from Hewlett & Dunn, just coming to let you know about our new collection of boots. It's going to be our dress boots. They're the Horsepower collection, and they're genuine exotic leathers and really comfortable. Comes in all different sizes and patterns, so come check them out.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back here, Sidelines with you on this Friday morning. Tyler McComas with us right now, KREF radio out in Oak City. I guess they call it Bricktown, Norman, everywhere. I was in last night. I was listening to your station. Y'all got a hell of a format out there. But I was listening, and they were simulcasting, I guess, with TV. There were 3 tornado warnings at that time.
Yeah.
So pretty well. What ended up happening last night? Because we've had storms here, but I know we had a big tornado here March 31st, an F3 in wind about 15 miles west of us, and it was pretty nasty. But I don't know, how did that end up last night?
It didn't end up being even the worst night of the tornado season. So I guess that's somewhat of a positive. That was last month on April 19th.
Yeah.
There was somewhere between 10 and 15 tornadoes last night that touched the ground. But Rob, that's just May in the state of Oklahoma. That's nothing new. That's nothing new.
It is. People keep trying to say Tornado Alley has changed. Now we're here in Memphis. We're 30 miles. We're 30 minutes from downtown. We're over at the farm right now, at the Cherry Farm, our hunting club, and working remote, about to go back to Memphis. But, man, the weather that hits us, it's unbelievable. And that's something about Oklahoma. Now, y'all are coming in to the SEC, and you and I were talking yesterday on the phone. A lot of Oklahoma fans that I've known growing up, and I followed the program for a long time. I don't see a long learning curve. I think fans are going to love going to Norman. That state it's just incredible. The Arkansas fans, I think, are excited because they're not the westernmost school in the conference, but they share a common border. You go on I-40 from Memphis to Oklahoma City. The first thing you see when you cross that border is 10 Killer State Recreation Area. I've been to Tulsa a bunch of times, and I think they've played maybe 15 times. Now, obviously, Arkansas and Texas have a series. A long history, Arkansas, Texas A&M, but you're getting kind of the best of the old Southwest Conference and Big 8, some of this stuff coming into the conference. But I know from our end down here in the South, we consider y'all Southerners, and it's going to be a hell of a party. I think Oklahoma fans are going to embrace this.
Here's what everyone, myself included, because I'm a season ticket holder, I'm one that I'd rather sit out in the stands any day and feel the environment. I'm just a college football junkie. I'm a season ticket holder. I don't want to sit in a press box where it's stuffy and you have to be quiet. But here's what everyone's most excited about, Rob. Yep. And you look at this year into what potentially your first year in the SEC is going to look like. Listen to OU's home schedule this year. This is what I'm paying for, Rob. Arkansas State at home, SMU at home, Iowa State at home, UCF at home, West Virginia at home, TCU at home. Sounds like a pretty awful home schedule, right? Because really it is. And, I mean, there's just no excitement there. And honestly, it's one of the bigger reasons that OU is going into the SEC. There's more money there, absolutely. But I even think about it from a vendor standpoint. Like OU will play West Virginia at home this year. And that's more than likely going to be an 11 a.m. game. Not as many people, at least around here, are out and about before the game, spending a lot of money before an 11 a.m. game. And then you look at a program like West Virginia, and look, the proximity, it's not right down the street, but that's a fan base that brings about 200 people to Norman. Whereas if you play Auburn the first time, Auburn might bring 6,000 to 8,000 people. You know what I mean? Like, it's just going to be more of an environment of what we crave. Less 11 a.m. kickoffs, better games, better kickoff times. OU played 6 11 a.m. games last year. Auburn, who wasn't a good football team last year, played just 3. So you're going to get better games. You're going to get better kickoff windows. It's better for the fans. It's better for the vendors. It's better for the city. I was recently at a Norman City Council Chamber of Commerce meeting. And to get prepared for the SEC, they have individuals in the Chamber of Commerce that went to Fayetteville this past season. They went to Lexington this past season, and they went to Tuscaloosa this past season. And they plan on going to more places before OU officially enters into the SEC. For an average SEC home game, Alabama, the city of Tuscaloosa, makes 3 times more money than the city of Norman on a regular Big 12 game. It's like $33 million versus $11 million. So everyone benefits with this. It's just going to turn Norman into something that, frankly, I don't know if we've ever seen before with all these fans coming in. It's so exciting, man. And I didn't even bring up all the cool places in the SEC that we're going to get to see from here on out. It's just great. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, I can remember when I was a TV reporter back in December of '89, the first time Alabama came to Jordan-Hare, and they were talking about the economic impact of, back then it was $8 to $10 million, and of course that's 34 years ago. And the fan bases in the SEC, what makes it so special is they all travel so well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you get those Arkansas fans coming in there? And of course, your good friends at Texas and Texas A&M, you're going to get to be reacquainted with them. Missouri's looking forward to playing y'all again. Look at your history. 51 conference championships, 7 national championships, 7 Heisman Trophy winners. It all started back in the 30s during the Dust Bowl, during the Grapes of Wrath. Oklahoma said, look, we're going through hell, but we can have great football. I don't think, I know you're looking at it and saying you look at your schedule this year, but for an outsider watching Oklahoma play, Texas has a winning record against every school in the SEC except for one school, and it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is 8-1-1. Of course, they hadn't played in about 90 years.
Yeah.
There's the reason for that. But I would be willing to bet Oklahoma has a winning record against every school in the SEC because they haven't played that many times. I get that. You're talking about the 5th or 6th winningest program in the history of college football. I don't think any SEC fans are going to be going to Norman thinking this is going to be easy. I look at Oklahoma. I've seen them just take out the big stick and whip a lot of teams in the SEC. I'm not saying that they're going to come in and win the first year, but I think it's not going to be a steep learning curve.
Yeah, just from a team perspective, they've got to get deeper and better on both lines, O-line and D-line. That's not a good place in the SEC that you want to be lacking. So they've got to figure that out a little bit. But no, I agree, man. I mean, and when I look at kind of the future of OU football, and when I look at the past 10 years or so, the Big 12 hasn't been a great conference. There have been years where they've had individual good teams outside of Oklahoma. We saw that with TCU last year, right? Yeah. But for the most part, the Big 12 has been, I think the narrative has been pretty fair. It's a league that hasn't played a whole lot of defense. It's easy, I think, when you're just winning that league every single year to, I don't know, like when you're not playing a Georgia every single year or an Alabama every single year, it's easy just to get in that flow of, well, what we're doing is working. We're fine. Yeah, we're winning the Big 12, and sure, we're getting beat in the college football playoff, but man, we're really, really close. What excites me about this is whatever the best version of OU is, whatever that is as a football program, I think that you're going to see it in the SEC just because of the challenges week in and week out, the challenges of recruiting. You're just going to see, I think, a better product overall. Now, I think everyone understands that doesn't mean that they're going to win more games in the SEC than what they did in the Big 12. I don't think immediately that's going to be the case. But what is it? A high tide lifts all boats. I think that's the case for OU and the SEC. And you were talking about the history of OU football. And if you look back at the history of OU, their best teams have come when they've played in what was deemed the best conference in college football. The SEC has been the best league for a while now. But, Rob, I'll argue that in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the Big 12 was the best conference in college football. Oklahoma was rolling. Mac at Texas was winning 10 games every single year. Yeah. Nebraska was starting to come down a little bit, but they were still Nebraska. Kansas State was having its best teams ever. A&M and Tech were competitive. Oklahoma State was good. And that's when OU was really making their run, winning the 2000 title, playing for it in 03, playing for it in 04, playing for it in 08. You look at some of those years in the Big Eight, whether it be in the 70s or the 80s, that was the best conference in college football at the time. So we all recognize the challenge of the SEC here. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it is going to be it's going to be a legit challenge. But if you look at history, OU's been their best when they played in the best conference. So I think that's a little bit comforting for an OU fan out there, even though you recognize just how big of a challenge this is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great series of points you just made. And you talk about on the line of scrimmage. You look at it, you're trying to recruit interior linemen. Edge rushers, yeah, they're going to want to play in that league. But it's the defensive tackles. That's what separates you. You want those guys like a Marcus Spears and a Derek Browne and Jalen Carter. You need those kind of guys. You're going to be able to get them a lot easier now going into the SEC because they're going to say, well, look who we're playing against, because we're going to break into these pods. We know how that's going to be. But the good thing is you're going to – Georgia still has not played at Texas A&M. Correct. And they've been in the league since 2012. And a friend of mine, Uncle Charlie, came up with this algorithm about 4 years ago where this is before it was announced that OU and Texas were coming to the SEC. And it would have allowed for, if you played 4 years at a school, if you stayed, and this was right after the portal came out, if you stayed all 4 years, you'd play every school in the conference at least twice, and you'd at least one time go to their stadium. We don't have that now. With the pods and go to a ninth game, I like it because you're going to play everybody. You're going to have 3 permanents. You're going to rotate. You don't really have a conference if you're not all playing each other. I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think we're excited about the possibility of a couple of months ago, I think Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated put out what he's hearing the pods could be. Of course, you'll play Texas every single year. That's not going to change in the Cotton Bowl. Missouri, I think people around here, and I hear this on my radio show, are a little annoyed that people believe OU Missouri is this rivalry and OU fans do not accept it as a rivalry. But the thing they're excited about is in that proposed 3-6 model, your other permanent opponent would be Florida. Okay. Well, you got a little bit of history with Florida. Played them in the Cotton Bowl back in 2020. They beat you in the national championship in 2008 with Tim Tebow. That's a program that you look at and say, okay, well, maybe Gainesville, Florida is not the easiest place to get to, but I can go to the Swamp every other year. Yeah. And then Florida's going to come here. Okay, that's new. That's like a new rivalry that can form. That's just a report, obviously. Like no one knows if that's actually going to be the case. But yeah, I think people around here, I know people around here are excited about the possibility of maybe playing Florida every single year and maybe creating a new rivalry in this new SEC. It sounds fun.
I don't think there's any doubt. And you look at what the SEC did. Missouri is in the East, and Texas A&M's in the West. I mean, but that goes back to, would you put Auburn, which is Lee County is on the Georgia line, right there on the Chattahoochee River. Would you put them in the East? But then the concern was, what if they play Alabama and then they play for the SEC championship a week later? I don't think there are enough cardiologists in the state. I mean, that would be brutal. But I believe what you're saying. The Oklahoma fans, the Chamber of Commerce, the people, you're bringing in. Let's say you've got your 4 conference home games are Texas, Arkansas, Florida, and Georgia. I mean, yeah. All of a sudden, you've got DVD, coffee table book type rivalries overnight.
Well, that's any of those that you just mentioned. Like, seriously, any of those games that you just mentioned. Yeah. If OU played one on their schedule this year, and granted they were supposed to play Georgia this year, but the point is any of those games would be the best home game OU's had since Ohio State in 2016. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. You have a home schedule with teams that aren't exciting, that don't bring a lot of fans, and that have 11 a.m. kickoffs. Like, that's not – I mean, you mentioned earlier, and I think it's a great point, OU fits into the SEC. The lifeblood around here is college football. I do a 4-hour show every single day, and 95% of the content is college football. People crave it here. That's what they want here. And they're tired of playing Texas Tech at 11 a.m. and Tech's bringing 12 fans. No, like, we want Auburn to come in and flood this place. I just think that aspect of it is so exciting. And whoever you play in your first year, whoever you play in the SEC in your first year, 2 or 3 of those home games are going to be the best 2 or 3 home games you've had in like 6 or 7 years. It's crazy to think about it that way, but it's true.
Yeah. And then in recruiting for Oklahoma, they're going to be now, I'm sure, anytime Brent Venables is a name that people in the SEC are very familiar with. I know Tommy Tuberville multiple times considered bringing him on at Auburn, and then he stayed at Oklahoma a long time. Goes to Clemson those 10 years with Dabo.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm not going to buy this narrative that somewhere between Clemson's 10 years, playing for the national championship 4 times, and him returning to Norman, that he stopped at some drive-through lobotomy place and forgot how to coach college football. That's elite defensive coach who's going to be successful. But let's talk about what happened last year in the first year. I mean, hey, Lincoln Riley took 22 players with him. That didn't help.
It didn't help. And I think that, and I fall into this, by the way, I think a lot of us were naive that, okay, well, Brent Venables is back, Rob, I've still never seen a coaching search where 100% of any fan base, forget OU, but 100% of any fan base wanted the same guy. That was the case with Brent Venables. No one wanted anyone else, Dan Lanning or Dave Aranda. Brent Venables was everyone's first choice. I've never seen that with a coaching decision before. But, yeah, I think that we were all naive in that, all right, well, defensive guys back, which is at the root of what Oklahoma wants to be. OU's never won a national championship without an elite defense. And the way that they were winning games with Lincoln Riley, it was just like, okay, we take it, but, man, winning 59-56, that's just not the heartbeat of Oklahoma football. We were naive that we thought Brent Venables would come in a few months' time. Everything that had been wrong, not being physical, not playing great defense, just his presence on campus would change everything. And here goes OU in year one, they're going to play elite defense. That just wasn't the case. They didn't have a ton of talent on campus ready to go. You talk about the roster turnover. Brent talks about it all the time. There were just some issues. They lost a lot of one-score games. And to be totally honest, I think Brent's in-game management at times was very questionable. Something that you expect to see from a first-year head coach. So when you can just combine everything,
hold those thoughts real quick. We're going to take a quick commercial break because I want to continue down this road. 100%. That tells you right there. He's very well liked. We'll be right back.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hey, Rob Browne back with Tyler McComas. Does sports radio show every day, 2 to 6 p.m. KREF Sports in Oklahoma City, Norman. Norman's maybe 20 minutes from Oklahoma City.
I live in like the heart of Oklahoma City, and it's like 35 minutes to get to Norman, but it's the far east side of Norman. It literally takes me 15 to get to Norman. So a lot of these SEC fans watching right now will probably be staying in Oklahoma City at some point during their trip to Norman.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I mean, people that we have listeners obviously with everywhere, but when you go to Oklahoma, you got Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. I mean, I hate that Bedlam's not going to be played anymore. And I don't like the fact that A&M and Texas, but now I think they're going to be playing again, whether they like it or not. And I think A&M's got to be really, really vigilant, not let up. They've got 11 years, head start on Texas being in the conference. But again, this is what makes college football so special. Let's keep going with the Brent Venables. You talked about the culture, the toughness and all. And 22 players left, including Caleb Williams, goes on and wins the Heisman Trophy. You're right. Nobody likes – I know in the South, Eastern Conference, we hate those high-scoring games. Mm-hmm. We love defense. But Alabama, about 6 years ago, was averaging about 31 points a game. They made changes on offense, and all of a sudden they're averaging in the mid-40s. And if you beat Alabama, you better be scoring more than 45. Mm-hmm. LSU did it in 19, put 46 on them. Auburn beat them 48-45. Typically, when Alabama loses under Saban, it's an epic loss. Let's go back. The Lincoln Riley, did he care about defense? Because all they did was, again, try to outscore people. But when you get against a team that plays the line of scrimmage really well, it's a different story.
So one of my favorite sayings that I've heard is it's not what you coach, it's what you emphasize. And Lincoln Riley in press conferences, he'd say, well, yeah, I want to play great defense. Yeah, I want to play elite defense. Well, that's not enough. What does your practice structure look like?
Yeah.
How are you structuring your football team? How are you going about recruiting? And, he said that he wanted to have a great defense, but that wasn't the structure of the program. It was an offensive-driven program. Let's get a 5-star quarterback. Let's win with offense. Let's win. I mean, he was a Mike Leach disciple, and that's the way that Oklahoma was trying to win, with better players than what Tech has ever had, more of a high-powered Texas Tech. And I think a lot of times it rubbed the fan base the wrong way, especially when you go play Alabama in an Orange Bowl in 2018 with Kyler Murray at quarterback.
Yeah.
Maybe the best quarterback in program history. And just like that, you're down 21-0. They're throwing around Kyler Murray like a rag doll. I was at the OU LSU Peach Bowl in 2019, and I've never, ever sat at halftime of a game and said, do we really need to play the second half? Like, do we really? Like, we get the point here. LSU could score 100 today. And those are the types of games. They played Georgia close in the Rose Bowl as well. They had the lead going into halftime, but every time they played one of those really good defenses in the SEC, they were getting embarrassed. So what Brent Venables is bringing, and we'll see if it gets there or not. Last year's recruiting class was ranked 4 by 24/7 Sports. It was the best defensive haul they brought in I don't know how long. 2 5-stars on defense. They're going to bring in a couple more 5-stars on defense this time around. The program shift is drastic. They're practicing much harder than what they have been previously. The whole culture, the whole program is just built differently. It's built on the defensive side. But you just can't do that in 6 months' time. That takes time to totally flip around the mentality of the program. And I think that's what we're seeing right now at OU. And hopefully that they'll get there, and hopefully they get there before the SEC move happens. But I think you're going to see a different Oklahoma than what you've seen the past 8 to 10 years or so, here moving forward at least.
No, I mean, I would agree with that because you're talking about getting those defensive guys. Venables is a great defensive coach. He also knows how to develop talent. That's the critical part. You look at Oregon when they play an SEC team. It's all about the line of scrimmage. I remember back in 2014 for the national championship. In 1936 was the first time ever that the poll era, whatever. I think Oklahoma or I think Oregon or Ohio State and Oregon both maybe played for the, were 2 of the best teams then. In 2014, everybody thought Oregon would beat them with speed. And I said, no, you're not. You look at Ohio State's front seven. There's a lot of South, a lot of kids from Texas and the South on that roster. And I was one of the only guys in the office. I was like, Oklahoma. I said, Ohio State's going to kill them. Well, you look at that line of scrimmage, and it's the depth, 2 and 3 deep on the front seven. That's what you see in the SEC. And, you look at Alabama, the reason their defense has not been as good, they don't have those big guys on the defensive line. They hadn't been getting the Ashawn Robinsons, the Quinnen Williams. There's a lot of, believe it or not, and they've been trying to outscore people. Mm-hmm. And they got their fan base, they're not real happy. And they were 11-2 last year, but they could have lost 4 or 5 games. They lost the number 1 pick in the draft. Now they don't have a quarterback. They've gone to the portal. So stuff all goes in cycles. But Nick Saban's been consistent. But Kirby Smart is going for a 3-peat. I just look at Oklahoma too. You're right. You can say you want to have tough defense, but it's what you do in practice. And I never believed that when I heard it. And I'm not even there every day like you are.
Yeah. So it's just a drastic shift. And it's just kind of funny how, no one stumbles upon accident the best offensive line or best defensive line in college football. Like, you can get lucky at quarterback. I think Louisville got lucky at quarterback with Lamar Jackson, right? Louisville's not some college football power, but they get Lamar Jackson out of the state of Florida, and he's the most electric player in college football in 2016, and he wins the Heisman Trophy. But programs like Louisville, they don't have the best offensive line. They don't have the best defensive line. To me, like, the best way to evaluate who the best programs are right now in the sport is to look at who has the best lines. That's Georgia right now, right? I think LSU is getting back to that. Michigan definitely has that right now. It's almost, when I look at who's the best in the trenches, to me, those are the best teams. Those are the best programs that have it going on right now. And Oklahoma's have that. They had the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in 2018. But until they get back to that, they're not going to win a national championship. I mean, OU had Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray in back-to-back years. Yeah. 2 of the best quarterbacks ever, maybe 2 of the best quarterbacks college football seen outside Joe Burrow in the past decade. And what did that get him? Well, it got him a conference championship, but it didn't get him a playoff win. So we know the blueprint here. We know the blueprint. The blueprint's been thrown in our face in the playoffs so many times. Yeah. It's getting a coach that knows the blueprint, and they do, and fully executing it. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah. Well, you go back to that Alabama-Oklahoma game in the Orange Bowl. At the end of the first quarter, I remember it was Alabama 21-0, but more revealing was Alabama had 194 yards of offense. Oklahoma had 0.
Yeah.
After one quarter, you're right. Now, and you look at the talent on the offense, and you look at, Oklahoma's always going to have that, but that's what Brent Venables has got to do. And we live in a different world now. I mean, you think about all the coaches that were given 4 and 5 and 6 years to build a program. Now nobody wants to go, you cook a brisket that weighs 15 pounds. That's about 15 hours. You better be patient. Okay. We cook it a lot over here. Who's going to give a coach? Look at Billy Napier at Florida.
Yeah.
Okay. He's got about 115 people on the football staff and 85 scholarship players. Buddy Martin, GatorbaitMedia.com's on with us every week. The clock is ticking. Well, Billy Napier didn't forget how to coach. He inherited a mess that Dan Mullen left him. You can look around at every school in the SEC, they've got issues, but Georgia and Alabama are just on another level, but even Georgia's above that. What will be success when you come into the SEC? Now you're talking, you could lose a couple of games, maybe 3, and still make a 12-team playoff.
Yeah, so that's tough.
That's a long question. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. And I actually want to hit on something you said about Napier and his staff, because I think it's interesting as it pertains to OU. What's immediate success in the SEC? Man, if I've asked this once on the radio show, I've asked it a million times. It's difficult because you're a program that for so long, for so many decades, at least 10 wins. Yeah. If we don't win at least 10 games, then it's a failure of a season. If we don't make the conference championship game, Now, I'm not saying OU fans have to totally readjust their expectations, but now in a 12-team playoff setting, I would say, Rob, that immediately in the first 2 years, success is make the 12-team playoff. I don't think it's do or die that you have to win the SEC the first 2 years. I think everyone kind of understands the situation, but you got to at least make the 12-team play. You got to be one of the best 12 teams in the first year or two is what I say. I think that's immediate success. I do want to go back real quick to the number of staffers that you said with Billy Napier, because it's interesting with OU, and it goes back to something I said a few minutes ago about OU kind of just got comfortable in the confines of the Big 12, thinking that, what we're doing is fine. I mean, we're winning the conference every single year. This staff came from Clemson. It wasn't just Brent Venables. It was Todd Bates, their defensive line coach, who won Recruiter of the Year. It was Thad Turnipseed. Alabama fans will remember Thad Turnipseed, who was at Bama and at Clemson, built all these great facilities. All these Clemson guys who had won championships got to OU and they said, what? You guys have this many staffers? Florida and Georgia have this many staff. When I tell you OU just got comfortable in the confines of the Big 12, the overall amount of staffers, the facilities, like we just thought here that everything was just great and that they're on the upper tier. These guys from Clemson came over and they said, we'll show you what it looks like, but this is not what it looks like. So OU's invested so much more in off-field staffers. Thad Turnipseed is, raising a whole lot of money to build this mega football facility right outside. It's just been such a shift since this new staff was hired, saying, well, you guys think that you're investing enough to win a championship? We know what it's looked like at Clemson. Here's what it really looks like if you want to win a national title. It's just crazy. The past 2 years, year and a half, I guess, have just been unlike anything I've ever seen, especially when you throw in a move to the SEC, which the rich history of Oklahoma football, this is going to be a new chapter. It's kind of weird to think about. You've had so much history, and starting in 2024, it's going to be a brand new chapter in this football program's history. It's just a lot of changes. It's fun, though.
Well, I mean, it can be like going from Class 5A or 6A to Class 7A in high school sports. It's a big upgrade. But the one thing you don't lack is passionate fans. Yeah. And you live in a blood red state, which mirrors that footprint of the Southeastern Conference. Your fans are going to love the people at the schools in the Southeastern Conference. We're just like y'all are. Austin's a little bit weird, but it's a fun place to go to. It's just a little bit, but I think about Oklahoma. I'm thinking about more Oklahoma, Toby Keith. I'm thinking about Garth Brooks. And here's a text from a listener in Valdosta, Georgia. Ask Tyler McComas about the Live golf tournaments this weekend in Oklahoma. He said 6 or 7 Oklahoma State alumni in the field, or is that from Oklahoma and Oklahoma? I'm not sure if he means from both schools, but we do know y'all have the softball championship there.
Yeah.
You have the golf national championship there. Y'all don't play around in a state of 5.2 million people?
Yeah, amazing. No, I mean, everyone just cares about sports here. And I would say the split between OU and Oklahoma State fans are 80-20. But, there's a Live Golf events with a bunch of former Oklahoma and Oklahoma State guys, and everyone up here's loved it. It's like – because there was a PGA event in Tulsa at Southern Hills 4 months ago or so, earlier this year. And, it's golf. You got to whisper. You got to be quiet. This Live Golf event, everyone's blaring music and wearing shorts. And I think all these Oklahomans are like, this is more our style, like drinking beer and listening to loud music out on the golf course. And everyone's just relaxed. So I think it's been a pretty cool event so far, for sure. It's not Augusta, that's for sure. It's not Augusta.
Well, it'll be fun. But here's an interesting observation about life in the South, just how it's going to be. And Tyler, I think you're going to love it. We're going to have to show you around when you come down to Auburn. We will take you to the Sigma Newhouse, 715 West Magnolia. This is from a listener over in Huntsville. Many years ago, I was at a dove hunt in Anderson, South Carolina. I had a cooler of Miller Lite as my seat. Shocking, because he's a Miller Lite. I know him. I've known Ray for 40 years. It was hot as hell, and the guy next to me saw me drinking. He came down and asked me for one. It was Danny Ford. We drank the whole damn thing. Great guy with great stories, but that's a culture that we live in out here. And look, we're going to come back just for a couple of minutes, and I'll let you. I didn't mean to keep you so long, but we just had some people asking about. let's get somebody on here from Oklahoma. And I said, yesterday we had Dan Matthews on from over at Chuck Oliver's show, Southern Sports Today, which you will be hosting next week. I want you to tell people about that. And got a couple of minutes before the break. But I said, I've been trying to get an Oklahoma guy. And like I said, we've had Barry Trammell on. He's kind of hard to reach. But I was struck by the fact if Dan and Chuck have you on, you got to be really damn good. And you talk about talking football 24/7, 365. That's what we do. We cover football, basketball, baseball, college. We have a lot of pro players that come back and are on the show with us. But this has been really, really revealing. We got to get you back on. Try to get next week if we can. But tell people how they can follow you and keep up with you on social media and everything. But really looking forward to the Boomer Sooner next visit.
Yeah, so on Twitter at Tyler_McComas, last name spelled McComas. As soon as I leave here, I talk college football all year long. College softball is really big out here because OU's really good. I'm recording I host a podcast, Diamond Envy is the name, and it's an OU softball centric podcast. I'll be recording that later. But yeah, Chuck Oliver's show next Tuesday, and I'm really excited about it just because, as a kid growing up loving college football, there was always something about the SEC for me. Getting to go to Tuscaloosa in 2003, Mike Shula's first ever game in Tuscaloosa. How about that? That's a fun thing. I want to say, you went out there. I've been to Arkansas several times, A&M in Missouri, obviously. I told you yesterday, I haven't been to Baton Rouge for a game, but I've seen LSU play in the Superdome, so that's basically the same thing as an LSU home game. So I've just been always enamored with that conference just because of the passion that's there, and to get to host that show on Tuesday is going to be fun. And I speak for the entirety of the fan base, man. Like we know what this conference is about. We know what this conference has been about for a while, and we're ready to be immersed in that lifestyle as well. Everyone's just super excited. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're ready. I mean, we're looking forward to it. And again, your social media address, Twitter
at Tyler_McComas is where you can follow me.
Okay. Look, this has been great stuff because I can tell you this. We're ready for you to come in here. We'll make us have a ninth game, which is another opportunity. Somebody's going to have to play 5 homes, and someone's only going to get 4, but that's what makes it fun. Have a great weekend. We'll be right back. Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports on the Georgia Bulldogs. Back to back. Could be right after this. All right, Rob Browne back now with Tyler. Tyler McComas was on there with us from Oklahoma City talking about the Sooners, Jordan, coming into the SEC. And it was amazing to hear him talk about the economic impact. He said a lot of the home games, because the other teams don't really travel, you may have an $11 million economic impact on the Norman economy, whereas they went out and went to Lexington and Fayetteville and some of these other SEC towns. It's about 3 times that. So they're excited about being into the league, and I think it's going to be fun having them in here. Let's talk about Georgia. Trying to go for that three-peat, lots of things happening. And I know even baseball took 2 out of 3 from Tennessee last weekend. But got to ask you about football in the portal. And also, last night I'm listening to the Buddy Martin show, GatorbaitMedia.com, doing some renovation talk about the stadium in Jacksonville. Could be another home and home like it was in 94 and 95. But their view was it'll never come back. Kirby wants it to be home and home, and he's on top of the world in college football. So kind of try to unpack that huge load I just threw at you.
Yeah, when it comes to Jacksonville, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all about dollars and cents. I mean, Jacksonville's going to have to make it enticing to the point that they can't say no, and I think they will ultimately. I do think there will be a break. The mayor of Jacksonville talked about some renovations coming to the Jacksonville Stadium, and I think that there may be a break there, but. Yeah, I've kind of come around when it comes to that game. I think they should leave it there. Georgia has had no issue recruiting when they haven't had that one weekend that they've got to go to Jacksonville. I mean, they are routinely, top 3 recruiting year after year. And think about the economic impact you were just talking about with Oklahoma. I mean, Tybee Island, all those St. Simons, everything around Jacksonville and the city of Jacksonville itself. I mean, they make so much money and have as long as that rivalry has been down there. So we'll see. I do think there will be that break as they work on the Jaguar Stadium. I think, Jacksonville, the city of Jacksonville will understand how much that game means, and they'll fight to keep it there. And I think ultimately they probably will. With the portal and stuff like that, Georgia, I thought, relatively unscathed. I mean, you can't overlook losing Bear Alexander. I think he's a very, very talented defensive lineman. I think he is going to be a star and really make plays at USC. I thought he had a chance to play a big role this year. Yeah. But other than that, you lost some reserves, some guys a little bit further down your depth chart, and kept a lot of guys that I thought, might leave, and not necessarily specific guys, but positions. They're really deep at wide receiver. I thought you could see maybe another offensive lineman or 2 leave. Outside of losing Bear Alexander, I think the losses were pretty minimal. I think those guys made good decisions. A guy like Ryan Davis, who has been at Georgia for a while, inside linebacker. Inside linebacker may be their deepest position. And I think he made a really wise decision to leave. He goes to UCF. He's going to be part of, playing Power 5 football. They're in the Big 12 now, as crazy as that is to remember and wrap your mind around. But on the whole, I think they did okay in the portal, not expecting them to add anybody from the portal. And other than Bear Alexander, I think the losses they did have were pretty minimal.
Yeah, and that was a surprise. I mean, everybody remembers him coming in the TCU game. He's a Texas kid, 4-star, but I'm surprised he left. I just, again, I figured he would hang in there. But I want to ask you about the Georgia defense. Let's talk about your defensive coordinator. Let's talk about his role, what Will Muschamp means, and also Mike Bobo. Again, you and I have talked about this. The one year he wasn't there was when Mark Richt struggled in 2015. Not struggled offensively, at least, but let's kind of go over those staffs.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Glenn Schumann. I think now technically he's listed as the sole defensive coordinator, and Will Muschamp is still co-defensive coordinator. But I mean, Schumann's got a really bright future. There was a lot of talk about him leaving for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they had interviewed him for the DC job. And he winds up staying. He gets a raise. I mean, he's an up and comer. I mean, he's going to get a chance to. He's very much in the position that Kirby Smart was. I guess about a decade ago, where he was seen as one of the up and coming coaches. But Schumann does such a good job, and he's the inside linebacker coach too. And I think it'd be hard to argue in the time that Kirby Smart has been at Georgia all those years that any team has had more talented inside linebackers than Georgia has, and they continue to stack talent. They got 3 really good freshmen coming in this year: Raylan Wilson, C.J. Allen, and Troy Bowles, who I think are going to continue that tradition. And Muschamp's still involved. He coaches the safeties, and their defensive backs have been so good, and expect that to continue. And the big question for Georgia this year is what the offense is going to look like with Bobo stepping back in. I think it's going to be really productive. I've made this point a few times. You'll probably see a little bit of drop off, but it's not going to be because of Mike Bobo. I think Todd Monken would have faced that as well, because they lost the starting quarterback. You lose a guy like Darnell Washington. You lose your top back in Kenny McIntosh. But I think they're still going to score a whole lot of points. And I think, there will be times where fans are probably a little miffed at Mike Bobo. But that's one of the great traditions about Georgia, Rob. You got to about Mike Bobo, because even when they were winning, when he was there the first time, people always had a critique, always had something to say.
Yeah, it is funny how there's so much sarcasm in what you hear from so many of the fans because they have access with social media and all, and they all think they know everything. But some observations I'll make in talking with pretty smart football people like you look at Georgia and you look at Alabama. Nick Saban, what he's got to be careful of is assistant coaches not wanting to come there thinking, oh, well, he's going to retire. Well, he's signed a long-term contract. But look what Bobby Bowden did. He stayed at Florida State way too long. And a lot of these assistant coaches that he would try to get would say, Coach, it's an honor to be offered, but I don't want to uproot my family and move, across the country and maybe in a year or two be going through this again. Kirby Smart looks like that he is doing everything right. I mean, everything he's doing is working. He is he? And when he was on TV, David Pollack made that reference before the TCU game. Georgia is the king. People made a big deal out of that, but Nick Saban, he goes to his lake house for a couple of days, or he goes to the beach for 2 or 3 days. He's on his laptop. He's got to get back and work. But I look at those two programs and look at the quarterback situation at Alabama. They went to Notre Dame to get a guy that was going to get beat out, in my opinion, by Sam Hartman. Georgia is replacing a guy that they didn't want. They sent him away. He came back. He was fourth team. He was a fighter. Of the 3 quarterbacks on that Georgia roster, who do you think is going to emerge, and which one do you think has the most upside? They're all highly rated.
I think I go with Carson Beck. I mean, and he had I think on the whole, the best spring. He definitely ended it on a high note. He was the backup last year with Stetson. And I really think as far as upside, he's right there with Brock Vandagriff. I mean, I think Brock may be a little faster, maybe a little more mobile. But I think you kind of saw with Brock, he kind of had a little bit of nerves playing in Sanford Stadium, which is understandable. I mean, I think he mentioned after that G-Day game that he'd never played in front of that many people in Sanford Stadium. So I give the edge to Carson. I don't think this competition's over because they're going to let these guys fight it out. And, Kirby didn't announce a starter, which I didn't anticipate he would. And there's really no upside to it. But Carson's the older guy. Carson, I thought, played really, really well at G-Day. And the offense was clicking. They had touchdowns on each of their first 3 drives. So I really think if it came down to it, either one of those guys could play for Georgia and could make plays. And I think in time, Gunnar Stockton, the other scholarship quarterback, could too. He's just a little bit younger. But I think Carson Beck is going to be the guy. And I think he's got a really good upside, got a cannon for an arm, and he can move too. I think when you look at both those guys, people tend to say Carson's got the bigger arm, but Brock is more mobile. But they're both have really good arms, and Carson can move too. And he scrambled a little bit in some of those games that he came in last year in relief of Stetson. But I give the nod to Carson, and I think when it's all said and done, he'll be the starter.
Yeah. So when you look at Georgia, what's the biggest difference that Georgia people, longtime Georgia football observers, fans, will tell you in, say, the Mark Richt years, 15 years, averaging about 10 wins a year, and then Kirby comes in? You've always had talent. Georgia would be, say, 10th or 12th in the country in recruiting. Now they're first, second, or third. What is it that Kirby's doing that other coaching staffs haven't done?
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. It's just the accumulation of talent. I mean, those teams with Mark Richt weren't talent deficient, but I mean, they were not recruiting first, second, third nationally every single year. And that's what really struck me. I wrote a few stories when Mike Bobo came back and talking to former players. I mean, I remember specifically David Andrews talking about, he said, we were really productive with Mike. He said, but let's be honest, this team that he's inherited now has more talent than the one, in 13 and 14. And, David made the point, don't get me wrong, we weren't deficient of talent. We had guys like Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall. He said, but what they got now is just, beyond what we had. I mean, I think that's what it is. They've just stacked talent. And it's gotten to the point, that where Alabama was back then, at the end of the Mark Richt era, and where they still are now, where you look at that depth chart and you can look at the second or third guy and go, this guy was a high 4-star or 5-star. I mean, this is, if a guy gets hurt, you're not going, oh crap, we got nobody behind him. Well, you got a guy really, really talented. And I think that has been the biggest difference, in my opinion, with where this team is to where it was with Mark Richt, where, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. It wasn't like it was gloom and doom. It was, 10 wins, 9 wins, 11 win season here and there.
Yeah.
But they are just so stacked with talent. And in a game that is so physically demanding, I mean, that's just so huge for your program. If somebody gets hurt, you got someone just about as talented waiting right behind them.
Yeah. So you look at the future of Georgia, this three-peat. You talk about there's really no margin of error because the schedule's not perceived to be that tough. I look at Georgia, and if I'm Kirby Smart, and I say, guys, we've got to beat everybody. We got to win convincingly, or nobody's going to respect us. That's the angle I take, because the schedule could be different. 1 week to the next, one of these teams or two of them could be hot that nobody thought was going to be any good. That's what happens.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, there are teams, if you look on there, that you could say, okay, they could have a surprise season. Tennessee, I think, will be really good. Kentucky got Liam Cohen back, and they got Devin Leary from NC State. Maybe they're really good. That Ole Miss game late in the year really interests me, although it helps that it's in Athens. But I think the biggest thing that Kirby, and he talked about this at the Pro-Am in Birmingham earlier this week, someone asked him, you pushed all the right buttons the last 2 years. What's the approach this time? And he had a very short answer, and it was just do the same thing we did the last 2 years. I mean, he knows what it takes to motivate these guys, and what he talked about during the spring was inherited, not earned. A lot of these guys who have been on these championship teams haven't played the roles that led to those championships. And you got some big guys who did, like McConkey, Cedric Van Pran, the inside linebackers last year, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, and Smile Munden. But a lot of these guys are going to be stepping up. You look at the quarterback, you look at whoever plays safety where Chris Smith was, you look at the defensive line. A lot of those guys didn't have that much say in Georgia. Going undefeated last year, winning the championship, and winning 14 games the previous year and winning the title. He wants those guys to prove themselves. And, a big talking point has been eating off the floor, not having high standards or saying, I won't do this or I won't do that. There is a hunger, I think, with these guys. And with the fact that you replace guys every single year, I think that's just a built-in, easy motivator for those guys who are going to be playing bigger roles.
Yeah, and you got to always – I like that, eating off the floor. You got to find excuses to win. That's a crazy term I use a lot, I've picked up, but it makes sense because these guys now – hey, those national championships were won by a lot of other guys too. This is y'all's team, and you've got to get inside their heads. You have to create your own identity and build your own legacy. If you can do that, you can do a lot of great things.
No doubt. And that's, the standard now. I mean, as tough as it is, if they go 11-1 in the regular season, there's going to be a lot of people who see it as a disappointment. Now, is that fair? I mean, not necessarily. Winning 11 games is hard,
Yeah, exactly.
But that's where the standard is, and that's what comes with being the top dog is when someone eventually, knocks you off, even if it's just a game, people are going to be disappointed when things play out that way.
Yeah, and overall, college football, looking ahead, magazines are going to start coming out here. Georgia, the last three-peat national champion was Minnesota in the 30s. I think it was 38, 39, or maybe 35, 36, and 37, because I know A&M won their national championship in 1939, but it's hard to do. You've seen Alabama get real close in 2013. Oklahoma and Nebraska have had back-to-backs, but Georgia, do you feel like the fans, if they don't win the national championship, will be more disappointed than the players, or the other way around?
Probably the fan. I mean, it's hard to say. I will say there are a lot of fans that I think understand and recognize how hard the last 2 years have been.
Yeah.
I guess I would say the players. I mean, the fans would be disappointed, but I think the players understand that there is a standard and, that how much it means to the team to continue winning at this pace. But I think that there would be disappointment. But I think people would still understand just what this run has been. I mean, you think about how dominant Alabama has been, and it had been about a decade since they had gone back to back. I mean, and to be in this conversation, I'm sure there would be hard feelings if they come up short. But I do think that people also would take a chance to step back and understand that this is just unprecedented. It's certainly unprecedented when it comes to Georgia football.
Yeah, I mean, and Kirby was at Alabama 09. He was there in 11. He was there in 12. So he's got some experience to draw upon. Hey, man, we're running out of time. Tell people, Jordan, how they can follow you and keep up with you, and look forward to having you on next week. Great stuff as always.
Definitely. Dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at Dogs247. Shout out, I'll have a feature on Jordan Hall, who's one of the freshman defensive tackles. A really fun story. Got a chance to talk to some of his family members. I would encourage y'all to keep an eye out on that. Should be out this afternoon.
All right, looking forward to it, man. Hey, we live in the greatest country in the world. Most often see the face of Christ and the least among us. And go out and help with the expectation of getting nothing in return. Don't give to get, give to give, as I've been told by Jay Evers and a lot of smart people. But have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, we are out of here.